Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Beam with Mary Shelter. And as we have amortized, let's start off this with just a brief discussion of 3 steps to really understand your wife. Now, you might be thinking, what about 3 steps to understand my husband? Well, we can do that on a later date. But right now, you do realize there's a difference in the way that men and women think in general. Now, it can get more complicated than that because the way people think, the way they react, the way they feel, actually also depends not just on gender, but on different personality types and those kinds of things. But that becomes too complicated for what we can discuss here. So let's just say it this way. Gentlemen, if you really want to understand your wife better than you do now, or women, if you want your husband to better understand you than the way he does now, these are the 3 steps that men need to do. Now, a word of caution here, ladies. If you think, I'm going to teach them these 3 things afterwards, so I'm going to jot them down, well, that's a noble idea. May not be the best way to do it. It may be better that when you find this video on YouTube later, that you refer him back to that so another guy's telling him rather than you. Because you've had that experience where that sometimes you have told him something over and over and over again, and then he hears it from somebody else, and he looks at you and goes, wow, that's brilliant. I wish we'd have thought of that before. And you're thinking, I told you that 1,000 times and you never heard it. To which you reply, no, I never heard you say it once. Sometimes people just hear things better from other people. Now, we could get into the psychology of that, but we don't have time today. So what are the 3 things? Gentlemen, if you really want to understand your wife, you must be attuned to what she's doing that can indicate what she's thinking or feeling. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not indicating here that what you have to do is just be spending all of your life, all of the time, watching your wife, trying to figure out what's happening next. That would be miserable for both of you. But instead, attuned enough that you can see signs, and often these signs are very obvious. If she has been, for example, very talkative, and now all of a sudden she's very quiet, something's going on. Or just the opposite. If she's been very quiet, but now she's talkative, but it doesn't really make sense to you what she's talking about or why she's so interested in it. In other words, you're looking for something that's different than normal. And when you see that, begin to be aware of the fact that, wait a minute, something's going on here that's different. Something has changed. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's a terrible thing. It could actually be a good thing, but be attuned enough to know that something has changed. And then the second part is, when you see that, try your best to understand it without aggravating her in the process. You say, what do you mean? Perhaps on occasion you've seen your wife and you can tell that she's upset about something, and so you just say, what's the matter? And she looks at you and says, nothing. And then if you are like on occasions when my wife has done that, what I've done is I've persisted. Now I can see that something's the matter. Why don't you go ahead now and tell me what's the matter so we can deal with it now? Because if you don't, we're going to wind up arguing over it for 3 hours, and then you're going to tell me, so tell me now and avoid the argument. That isn't smart. I know that because I've done it. It just isn't smart. Now, obviously, if you can ask a question and she answers, that's really good. If she'll answer the question, then ask the question. It's that simple. Just ask. If she doesn't answer the question, then realize that it's something that she's not ready to get into right now, and you let her know that you're willing to understand and listen at your first available opportunity that's comfortable for her. And so if you say, I can see something's the matter, what is it? And she says nothing, then don't push. Just say, well, it appears to me that something's wrong. But it appears also to me that you're not ready to talk about it right now. I'd like to know. I'd like to do whatever I can to help, to assist. So whenever you're ready to tell me, I'm here. And if you do that, gentlemen, then don't make yourselves unavailable. Don't then go outside to cut the grass at that moment. Don't decide you've got to go visit a buddy at that moment. If you're making that offer, then stay around until such time as she's ready to explain to you. And so the first step is you must notice that something's different. The second step is make it convenient for her to tell you what it is. And it may take a little while. Women differ on this. And the third thing is this. If you then finally understand what it is, do not try to do for her something she does not want you to do. In other words, once you understand what it is that she's looking for, whatever need that she has, don't think in terms of what you think you need to give her or do for her. Think in terms of what is it she needs right now. The classic example of that is, let's say your wife comes home from the grocery store and she's really upset because the checkout lady was rude to her in some fashion. Now, the typical husband response is, well, now this is what you should have done. That's not the right answer because it's not understanding her need. Or I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just drive down there right now and fix this. And that's not what she's needing either. If you pay attention and you understand her pain, the first thing you always do is get on her side of the table. Wow, that's terrible. I'm so sorry that you experienced that pain. I'm here for you. Is there anything that you would like me to do to help you? And probably in a situation like I've just described, there's not going to be. She's going to say, no, I just want you to understand. And if that's what it is, she just wants you to be empathetic. She wants you to be on her side. To like, boy, I'm with you. She should have never treated you that way. If that's all she needs, then that's all you give. And you don't try to step over and become her dad or her mentor or her bodyguard when she doesn't need one. At that point, you just become the person who listens. Now realize I went through these really quickly, but make sure you heard them. Number one, be attuned enough to your wife to know when something is different. Number two, when you see that, gently, without pushing, try to find out what it is, but understand that rather than you guessing, you really need for her to tell you, but don't push her to tell you when she's not ready. Just let her know that you're there and ready to hear whenever she's ready to talk. And number three, when you do finally understand it, don't go into fix-it mode. Don't go into rescue mode. Very carefully understand what it is she really needs from you. And if all she needs is you poor baby, I can't believe that happened, then that's all you give her. If she wants more, then you do more. Now, our CEO, Kimberly Holmes, is here, and you were joking before we went on the air about the 3 that you would be giving husbands. So let's just go ahead and say what those are.
I did. So the first one I said would be listen, which goes right along with that last one that you were saying, which is we're not always looking for the fix-it, the answer, whatever. We really do, a lot of the times, just want to hear the empathy of it, right? We want you to just empathize with us, not try and step in and fix it. The second one is stop getting man colds. Just stop. Can't handle it. I saw a candle. My husband and I were in Asheville this weekend, and I saw this candle, and the scent was man cold. And it said that it was infused with helplessness. And I thought, this is what women everywhere need, especially during the winter months. And
are you saying that men don't handle minor illnesses very well?
Oh my goodness. You're citing death wishes and wills at the sniffles. It's ridiculous.
Now, just because of the fact that your husband, Rob, reacts that way, do you think that that's going to be generically applied to all men?
Most men, yes.
Well, there are a few memes about it.
So many memes. You know it's true. And the third one I said is try and live a day in her shoes, because we're talking about understanding your wife. I think for Rob to really understand what goes through my mind, the things I'm feeling, if he would live, and of course this is impossible, but if he could live one day in my shoes and see what it's like and see the things that I deal with, the way that I process it from my past and my perspective, it would add a whole new level of understanding, and vice versa. If I were able to switch bodies with him for a day, it would be amazing. We can't do that, but the things that you were just talking about help us to be able to. We understand that there's a past and a way that people filter things and things that trigger them, so to say, from hurts that they've experienced in the past that make them more vulnerable to things hurting them more now. I mean, all of these play into when something goes wrong or when things are going right and you really understand what's happening. So there's so much we could dive into with that. We're just scratching the surface.
This is under the general heading of what's called emotional intelligence, so we're not going to get into here because it gets pretty complicated. But emotional intelligence starts with you, first of all, understanding your own emotions. Because if I'm not attuned to my own emotions, if I'm just blowing them off, ignoring them, not paying attention to them, then it's highly unlikely I'm going to pay attention to my spouse's moods and her emotions and the way she reacts to things. And so it's a much more complicated subject than what we're discussing here. But these 3 points we made are applicable. They're valid and they work if you choose to use them. Now, they're not always easy. Really, as simple as they sound, they're not always easy because sometimes your emotions are involved, her emotions are involved. But if you learn to think and do like this, life gets better.
Sure does.